Coming up on this Monday edition of Newsline at noon, with a heat wave showing no sign of subsiding, Korea's power reserves are expected to dip to dangerously low levels today, forcing authorities to issue the nation's second highest warning. Authorities are urging the public to reduce their use of electricity. President Park Geun-hye orders the government to rewrite its tax proposal that has sparked opposition-organized street protests. Critics say the original plans would excessively burden the middle class and low-income salaried workers. Plus, days before their peace talks, Palestine criticizes Israel for authorizing more than 1,000 Jewish settlements. As part of its bargain for talks, Israel also releases the names of 26 long-term Palestinian prisoners. These stories and more on Newsline at noon.
Where's the best place for bibimbap?
Les Jeux Olympiques d'hiver se dérouleront-ils à Pyeongchang?
هل أنتم حقاً سابع أكبر مصدر في العالم؟
この歌手は誰ですか？你好，最近哪部电视剧的人气最旺？
Korea is attracting interest from around the world. The more you know, the more you want to know. Dynamic Korea.
Thanks for joining us. You're watching Newsline at noon. I'm Chae Yusan here in Seoul.
Good to have you with us. I'm Mark Broom. Korea is again on high alert for impending power shortages as a thermal power plant generator was shut down on Sunday night due to turbine problems.
The government expects Korea's electricity consumption to reach its annual peak for the first 3 days of this week. Our Kim Young-gil has more.
In the face of a looming energy crisis, Korea's energy minister said Sunday the government is doing all it can to secure sufficient power reserves.
Even minor problems at any of the country's power plants this week could lead to serious consequences, such as nationwide blackouts that we experienced back in 2011. The government is doing all it can to secure additional power reserves.
During the first 3 days of this week, the government has strongly urged all office buildings, homes and factories to save electricity during 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. The country's electricity demand is expected to reach its annual peak, topping 80 million kilowatts, which would cause the country's power reserve to dip below 2 million kilowatts. To add to concerns about this unprecedented demand, a 500,000 kilowatt generator at a thermal power plant in Tangjin, located in South Chungcheong province, was shut down on Sunday.
The generator turbines were vibrating too much that we had to abruptly shut it down. We are trying to find out what caused the problem.
Repairs are underway, but officials say it will take at least 1 week before operations can resume. Another thermal power plant generator in Seocheon, South Chungcheong province, was temporarily suspended Monday morning due to problems with the pumping system, but operations resumed an hour later. Kim Young-gil, Arirang News.
North Asian countries have been having a hard time keeping their nuclear power plants online and running safely in recent years. This is fueling concern about the high dependence these resource-poor countries have on nuclear energy. Our Yurian reports.
To countries like Japan, Taiwan, and Korea that lack natural resources, nuclear power has long been an essential source of energy. But safety concerns are causing many to reconsider the continued use of nuclear power. Just last week, the Taiwanese government announced one of the country's nuclear power plants may have been leaking radioactive water for the past 3 years. The leak was identified at the first nuclear power plant located at Shimen, not too far from the densely populated capital, Taipei. The use of nuclear power on an island like Taiwan has long been controversial, as a major leakage could contaminate the entire area. Activists use the example of the Fukushima nuclear accident when they call for a complete ban on nuclear energy in the country. The Japanese government also announced last week that 300 tons of radioactive water is pouring out of the Fukushima plant every day. It also admitted the plant operator's TEPCO is still struggling to handle the situation some 2.5 years after the accident. Here in Korea, 6 of the country's nuclear reactors are sitting idle, 3 for maintenance work, and the other 3 after they were found to contain parts with fake safety certificates. More plants could be subject to a shutdown as the investigation continues to see if additional test certificates have been faked. With so many of its nuclear power plants out of action and the scorching summer weather yet to reach its peak, the nation is bracing itself for a possible blackout. As one of the cheapest sources of energy, it's no wonder North Asian countries have become highly dependent on nuclear energy. A third of Korea's electricity comes from nuclear power, a third as well for Japan before the 2011 earthquake and tsunami, and nearly 20% for Taiwan. Yurian, Arirang News.
President Park Geun-hye has ordered the government to rewrite its recent tax code proposal that has sparked opposition-organised street protests. Responding to the opposition's accusation that the tax plan only increases the burden on the middle class and low-income salaried workers, President Park said policymakers should make sure it doesn't do things to make life harder for them. In a meeting with her senior aides Monday, President Park stressed re-examination of the revised tax code was necessary, as there were parts that go against her economic policy of improving the livelihoods of ordinary people. She asked her secretaries to thoroughly discuss the issue with political parties and Parliament and reflect public opinion to solve the hardships facing such households. Calling the government's original plans to overhaul the tax code a tax bomb on the middle class, the opposition Democratic Party has launched a fresh public protest outside the National Assembly. Our political correspondent Kim Yeon-ji reports.
The main opposition Democratic Party has put up a fight against the government after it announced plans last week to overhaul the tax code for next year. The DP says the government's original plan for a tax code revision puts an excessive burden on middle-class salaried workers whose incomes are transparently exposed. The original proposal was forecast to bring in more taxes from the top 28% of all salaried workers, who annually earn 34.5 million won, roughly $31,000 or more.
I ordered my party to create a special committee to protest the government's proposal for the tax code overhaul, which is effectively a tax bomb on the middle class and the ordinary people. We will block the tax bomb for sure.
On Monday, the DP launched a fresh public protest in the heart of Seoul. The opposition party plans to meet with salaried workers out in the streets and collect signatures from those who oppose the government's tax code revision. The ruling Saenuri Party was quick to criticize the DP's all-out offensive against the government and called on the opposition party to return to the National Assembly. The ruling party argues the DP is only doing this to turn people's attention away from the missing transcript of the 2007 Inter-Korean Summit, an issue that has created a long standoff in the political arena. The ruling party has accused the previous liberal Roh Moo-hyun administration of destroying the transcript, while the DP says the succeeding Lee Myung-bak administration must have gotten its hands on the presidential documents.
What the DP is doing as a protest outside the National Assembly, that cannot be justified. It lacks common sense, and the DP is asking for the impossible. It must return to the Assembly and take care of pending issues, if it respects the people.
Kim Yeon-ji, Arirang News.
Officials in Panama say they found more explosives on the North Korean ship they seized about a month ago. This comes as inspectors say they are now ending their search of the ship that was impounded in Panama for carrying undeclared arms from Cuba. Panama Security Minister said authorities found equipment for launching missiles in the last container on the ship that was opened. Authorities removed and opened 25 containers in total that were hidden beneath sacks of sugar. The Cheongcheong was traveling from Cuba to North Korea when it was seized on July 15th at the Panama Canal. Under UN sanctions, Pyongyang is banned from buying or selling arms. In the coming days, UN officials are expected in Panama to determine if the cargo did violate those sanctions. With the two Koreas scheduled to continue their talks this week on reopening the joint Kaesang industrial complex, all eyes are on whether the North will show a change in its attitude. Experts say Pyongyang has so far refrained from any actions that could affect the mood of the talks, as the upcoming meeting will be crucial in deciding the future of the business park. Hwang Sung-hee has the details.
South Korea's unification ministry said Monday it is calmly preparing for its upcoming meeting with the North. The two Koreas are scheduled to meet on Wednesday in Kaesang to continue their discussions on reopening the jointly run factory zone. Pyongyang has yet to protest the joint military exercise between Seoul and Washington scheduled for next week. Last year, the North ramped up its rhetoric 2 weeks before the Ulji Freedom Guardian drills began, calling it an exercise for war. Pyongyang had earlier in March threatened to scrap the inter-Korean armistice agreement ahead of a joint military drill between the South and the United States. Experts say the North may be refraining from any actions that could break the momentum in dialogue. Such views come in line with comments made by North Korea's point man for cross-border affairs Kim Young-gun during a recent meeting with a Korean-American businessman who said the success of the joint business park will lead to further inter-Korean cooperation.
Kim made it clear that if the Kaesong Industrial Complex does well, so will other plans to develop the DMZ.
Experts say the upcoming meeting will be crucial in determining the direction of inter-Korean relations. The general consensus is that the North will maintain a conciliatory gesture for a swift normalization of the joint factory zone, but will react aggressively should the two Koreas fail to reach a favorable agreement on Wednesday. Hwang Sung-hee, Arirang News.
Kenneth Bae, the Korean-American who has been detained in North Korea for the past 9 months, has reportedly been hospitalized after he lost over 22 kilograms at a prison labor camp. Speaking at a prayer vigil for Bae in his hometown of Seattle on Saturday, Bae's sister Terry Chung said her brother's health has deteriorated rapidly. As well as the extreme weight loss, she said he was also suffering from an enlarged heart and diabetes. Kenneth Bae, a Christian missionary, was arrested last November on charges of trying to overthrow the communist regime. He was given a sentence of 15 years of hard labor earlier this year. While many are keeping an eye on how the upcoming Ulchi Freedom Guardian exercise will affect inter-Korean talks on reopening the shuttered Kaesong complex, the South Korean Air Force has departed to the US for a multinational joint air drill. 6 South Korean F-15K fighter jets are now at the Eielson Air Force Base in Alaska after successfully completing aerial refueling from the US Air Force. The drills, dubbed Red Flag Alaska, were designed by the US Pacific Air Force to train air combat operation capabilities with participating units. Some 90 South Korean airmen, including 26 pilots, will be taking part for 12 days from Monday local time to boost overseas air defense strategy and expand joint military drills with the US and other allied nations.
One of the few surviving Korean victims of the Japanese military's wartime sexual slavery has passed away. The House of Sharing, a shelter for sex slave victims, confirmed the death of 87-year-old Lee Yong-nya on Sunday.
The thought of being forced to sacrifice her youth made it hard for her to fall asleep. She said it felt like bugs were crawling over her body. She was tormented.
Lee left the country at the age of 16 and was forced to provide sexual services to Japanese soldiers in Myanmar during World War II. Since 1995, she was one of the leading activists in protesting against Japan's wartime atrocities, demanding not a settled agreement, but a sincere apology from the Japanese government. With her passing, only 57 registered Korean sex slave victims now live in hope of receiving that apology. Korea's import prices fell for the 11th straight month in July in another sign of weak inflation. The Bank of Korea said Monday that the nation's import prices dropped 4.3% last month from the same period a year earlier. The central bank attributed the drop to the local currency's gain that helps offset higher oil costs. The nation's export prices also dipped 1.5% in July from the same period last year.
With just a matter of days left until peace talks resume, Israel has approved a plan to build more Jewish settlement homes in East Jerusalem and the West Bank. The decision has incensed the Palestinians who are questioning Israel's sincerity in engaging in the peace negotiations. Our Arjunju reports.
Israel approved the construction of nearly 1,200 new homes for Jewish settlers on Sunday, just 3 days ahead of the resumption of peace talks with Palestine. The Israeli government plans to build about 800 new settlement units in East Jerusalem and 400 in the West Bank. There are concerns Israel's move could derail the upcoming talks, with Palestinian officials criticizing the approval and urging Israel to make decisions that contribute to the peace process.
Who does these things are determined to undermine the peace negotiations, are determined to force people like us to leave the negotiating table.
However, Israel strongly denied such claims, saying the settlement expansion has nothing to do with its commitment to the peace talks.
The policy is always on the table. We said at the Bayit Yehudi party that we will not stand against the peace talks. I have the responsibility as the Minister of Housing to find our young couples houses all over Jerusalem and also in Karne Shemron, Ariel, etc.
Meanwhile, the Israeli government has published a list of the first group of 26 long-term Palestinian prisoners it will free on Tuesday. Israel has promised to release a total of 104 prisoners, a condition agreed upon for the peace negotiations to move ahead. 14 of them will be transferred to the Gaza Strip and 12 to the West Bank. However, Israel made it clear that should any one of them engage in hostile activity against Israel, they will have to return to finish their sentence. Ju, Arirang News.
Yet another twist in the ongoing U.S. surveillance scandal. It appears the U.S. National Security Agency was granted secret authority to search the emails and phone calls of U.S. citizens without a warrant. The Guardian reports that a document provided by former CIA contractor Edward Snowden shows the spy agency has a secret backdoor that permits it to hunt for communication databases of individual Americans without a warrant, using their names or other personal information. The newspaper points out that the authority, which was approved in 2011 with the revision of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, contradicts repeated assurances by President Obama and intelligence officials that U.S. citizens are not targets of the NSA's surveillance program. A wave of car bombings killed over 60 and injured nearly 300 in Iraq on Saturday as Iraqis celebrated the end of Ramadan. The U.S. State Department says the attacks, which were centered around Baghdad, bore the hallmarks of al-Qaeda's Iraqi branch, noting that the branch's leader, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, is now based in Syria. The U.S. said there was a $10 million reward for information leading to his capture or death. The U.S. added it was prepared to work with the Iraqi government to counter the threats from al-Qaeda. Saturday's bomb attack was just the latest round of violence in Iraq this summer. More than 1,000 people were killed in July, the highest monthly death toll in Iraq since 2008.
Pope Francis has encouraged the need for respect and dialogue with Muslims as the holy month of Ramadan comes to an end. Delivering an address at St. Peter's Square in Rome Sunday, Francis said he wanted to mark his esteem and friendship for all Muslims. And he cited the example of his namesake, Saint Francis, who loved every human being deeply. He went on to say that mutual respect is fundamental in any human relationship, especially among people who profess religious belief. The rain was pouring and he was trailing for most of the race, but the final result never seems in doubt when Usain Bolt is involved. The Jamaican sprinter overcame the tricky conditions to reclaim his 100-meter crown at the World Athletics Championships in Moscow on Sunday with a time of 9.77 seconds. American Justin Gatlin was second and Bolt's Jamaican teammate Nesta Carter took the bronze. Bolt lost his world championship status through a false start 2 years ago at the 2011 championships, which took place in the central Korean city of Daegu. Fatigue and dehydration have become commonplace as temperatures continue to soar across the country. But there are plenty of traditional Korean cuisine that can help keep the heat at bay while still delighting your taste buds. Our Paul Lee shows us what's on the menu.
The sweltering heat here in Seoul is leading many to crave a bowl of special cold noodles or naengmyeon at local restaurants. Naengmyeon is a traditional Korean dish that's become a staple meal during the hot summer season. The tangy ice broth, julienne cucumbers, and slices of pear offer a truly refreshing taste.
Cold buckwheat noodles definitely revitalize the spirit. So after eating, not only does it taste great, but you feel cooler as well. It's the best thing to have in the summer.
It's said that this kind of food helps prevent illnesses among older people. So that's why we come here often and eat.
Another iconic summer dish here in Korea is samgyetang. The steaming bowl of chicken soup infused with ginseng aims to fight fire with fire, as the healthy ingredients help recovery from fatigue and prevent exhaustion amid rising temperatures.
It's supposed to be the hottest day of the year on Monday, so I thought I would take this time to come here and eat some samgyetang to fortify myself.
Both of these highly popular summer cuisines are loaded with nutrients that may otherwise be lost through excessive sweating in the scorching sun. Nutritionists say the soft textures also help with digestion and ensure a steady supply of energy.
These days, you may be lacking a lot of necessary micronutrients. Therefore, it's very important to ensure a balanced diet that includes food rich in nutrients, in particular vitamins and minerals.
It's recommended that you stay away from sugar-heavy treats such as ice cream and soda, as they can make you feel even thirstier. So in order to ward off the heat, keep it simple. Drink plenty of water and dig in. Paul Yi, Arirang News.
Some extremely delicious Korean dishes there this summer. Okay, let's get a check on the sweltering conditions we have here in Korea with our weathercaster Lee Ji-yeon, who's standing by at the Weather Center. Good afternoon to you, Ji-yeon.
Well, hello there, guys. Well, it's been said that the numbers of cicadas has increased while mosquitoes have decreased due to blistering heat that has swept the country this summer.
Yes, I really noticed that there aren't as many mosquitoes around this summer. I haven't really been bitten that much. I normally do get bitten. But the cicadas, they're really loud this year, even louder than normal this year. It's pretty annoying.
Yeah, cicadas are well known to be one of the loudest of all insects. They produce sounds of up to 120 decibels, which I believe means their sound can be heard as far away as 2 kilometers away.
And the male cicadas are the ones that are singing, and one of the reasons for this is to look for a mate. And they will eventually disappear when the fall comes, so we're just gonna have to bear with it for a while. And what we're gonna have to struggle with more for the time being is the fierce heat wave. Now today is also the final day of the 3 hottest days in Korea, Malbok, and temperatures today are surely reflecting this. The heat wave advisory and warnings have expanded across the much of the country, and it's been said that tomorrow's weather conditions shouldn't be that much different from today. So tomorrow we'll have a few clouds passing by and may experience certain showers at times. Now the prolonged heat wave is going to continue throughout the week, so please hold on to your cold water bottles. Now most of the morning fog has burned off and we're looking at clear skies. The high pressure system from the North Pacific will bring steamy weather this way, so expect the high temperatures and unpleasant conditions throughout the day. With that, let's take a look at today's numbers. The capital and Busan will reach up to 33 degrees Celsius, that's 91 degrees Fahrenheit, and Daegu and Gwangju will continue to bake under the heat at 37 and 36. Now let's see how other regions are looking. It looks like Jeju will climb up to 35, while Dokdo and Mount Kumgang will be topping out at 33. Now that's all for Korea, and here's the global forecast for viewers around the world. That's all for me today. Don't forget to have a bowl of samgyetang. Have a great rest of the day, and back to you, Mark and Yusan in the studio.
Thank you very much, Gian. I'm pretty hungry now. And those are the stories we're following at this hour. But stay with us, of course, for the latest on the power shortage alert here in Korea.
Join us again tomorrow here in Seoul at noon, Korea time.